Hey, can you guys hear me? Anybody out there? Hello?
I can hear you.
All right, hey, thanks. Just want to make sure I got a sound check out there. All right, everybody, get ready to get your Scout app out. That's a joke. All right, I think we're ready to go. Hope everybody's warm and safe out there. I actually don't know the state of the roads, although I've seen a lot of ice. How many people are on campus? No takers. All right, so let me just get started. The chapter is chapter 7, so community politics and regulation. I'll post this as a recording. And so, oh yeah, and so there was a question that came up in there about what chapters would be the chapters for the quiz. It's going to be chapter 7. So chapter 7 of Age of Cryptocurrency, or sorry, yeah, that's right. Sorry, Bitcoin and cryptocurrency technologies. Right. Bitcoin and cryptocurrency technologies, the Blue Book, chapter 7, community politics and regulation. All right, and then does anyone have questions? Turn that off. Right. Okay, so Blue Book, chapter 7. You'll see that. So community politics and regulation. So we're going to talk about this content, so this gets away from kind of the technical areas of the text. Well, that's interesting. Not completely, to some degree. It's not mathematical, but just sort of what does it mean? what does Bitcoin sort of mean to people? All right, so the first part talks about consensus, about what, again, what is the meaning of Bitcoin? And so let me just put up some ideas. So tell me if you can read this okay. So consensus on Bitcoin. And so, so there's rules, and then history, and value, and that's basically it. Rules, history, and value. So rules, I guess I'd like to flip over and sort of show you, but basically this is the code, right? So rules with software almost always has to do with some executable code, and that code reflects cryptographic and mathematical concepts. But in the consensus on the network is essentially what code do you run? And not everybody runs the same code exactly, but the core of what is acceptable is some sort of a consensus. And so the core consensus as far as the rules is concerned is what's called Bitcoin Core. So Bitcoin Core is the reference software that people use to say whether one version of the software, which might be written in some other, just by a different team for another purpose, satisfies all the rules. Well, in the end, it's agreeing on Bitcoin Core. Related to that idea is the idea of a fork. Well, I guess either hard or soft fork. So soft fork, and then if there's a soft fork, then there must be a hard fork. So forks are changes in the rules that change what is acceptable from the point of view of blocks that will be accepted or transactions that are accepted. There have been changes over the time of the existence of Bitcoin. Most of them had to do with realizing there's some kind of exploit, like a security exploit that could be done, and then changing the code to mitigate the possibility of those sorts of exploits. So the difference between a soft fork and a hard fork, soft forks will accept everything that's on the network already, and hard forks change the protocol so that really you have to use the new software to use it. And so there have been some important hard forks. Bitcoin Cash, for example, is an example. Bitcoin Cash is an example of a hard fork in that set of consensus, but that has sort of slid off and created a new cryptocurrency out of a hard fork. So they're infrequent, that's for sure. So there is a different set of software. So I guess conceptually, Bitcoin Core is kind of the center reference point, right? So there's the core, and then associated with the protocol, there's what are called BIPs. So Bitcoin Improvement Proposals. There's a bunch of them. They don't affect the core, right? The core is still running the transactions. And the one I think we mentioned, or just for example, right? So the idea of a brain wallet, for example, is one of the Bitcoin improvement proposals. And so it doesn't change really how any of the transactions work in the network. It doesn't affect anything Bitcoin Core, but it could change what software is used to create a particular key in a wallet, for example. And so they go through more of a wider community. There's a small group of developers, I guess, put it in here. There's core. Oh, I think that's actually in a spot where you can't read. Let me, I got a white spot here. So Bitcoin Core comes from core developers. So core developers are the ones that have permissions to actually modify the core. It's a small group that change those. If they make changes, that doesn't mean everybody has to abide by those changes. People could just not run a new version of the software if the miners or other people, other nodes on the network didn't accept the idea that that's what people want. And so the core devs don't have any sort of absolute power. They are just one of the other sort of members of the community, significant members of the community, and that's kind of it. All right, so history. I think, I guess this is best told by analogy, right? So if you had to get your car fixed, would you take it to a shop that just started, or would you take it to a shop that has been there for 15 years? So that idea of a reputation, typically for most people, builds the idea of trust and value. So you feel more confident that if you take your car to a mechanic that's been there for a while, then chances are they've had good experiences, and other people can, you can look at what sort of experiences that other people had with them and feel like it's likely that if I have a transaction with you, I'll have the similar, some sort of similar experience. So history builds that idea of trust. So there's consistent rules. So a history of transactions that have worked out, right? And then the sense of value is, we've talked about it, but what is the value of a Bitcoin? Some sort of a combination of everybody understanding what the rules are, knowing the history of it having value over time, well, so who are I guess let's look at who are people who really talk about the value. Let's see here. For developers, stakeholders. So value, let's go this way, is stakeholders. Like, who cares about the value in here? So the core devs, right? These people, and why would you spend time and effort building something you didn't care about? So the core developers, the miners. Sorry to put, I'm not sure how to rank these. The developers are making a living off of the software. Pretty good chance that they're also invested into the system. The miners usually have pretty significant investments, like dollar capital investments, in order to be able to mine the Bitcoin. So that reflects a pretty strong commitment. And then there's just straight up investors, right? So, and there's a significant group of people, right, that are neither miners nor core developers, but in fact feel like Bitcoin is a good place to store value. And so those are stakeholders that believe that if they own some amount of Bitcoin, that somehow in the future there'll be more of value in that in the future, or at least it'll be equal value, and will be better than maybe putting in I don't know, fiat currency in a country where currency is unstable, and therefore they could lose a lot of money if they put it in their local dollars, compared to putting it in something that they could move in and out of the country, and still have sort of significant investments that aren't lost. So those are stakeholders. So roots, let's hear history, value. I guess that is history. So roots of Bitcoin. Guess we can draw a line out that way. So where did Bitcoin come from? This was talked about in the other book, but cypherpunk. Oops. So this was a mailing list back in the day. I guess something similar to like a Facebook group or something like that. So a mailing list of people that were both libertarians. So I just pointed it out in the book. So libertarians, and interested or knowledgeable about cryptography. So the core idea of the libertarians is you pay your way, right? So that libertarians like, okay, if you want something, you should go to the effort of building that yourself. And if you think it's valuable, then you pay for the value that you get. So that's kind of a libertarian point of view, like minimalist government. And of course, cryptography is the idea of building up tools using modern mathematical cryptographic techniques so that you could take an idea, a libertarian idea, such as control of your own money, and hopefully create a system that using modern techniques represents those libertarian ideas in a way that other people can't sort of break them somehow. So, so the cypherpunks was the sort of important group to start the idea up in. And maybe the other thing to really know is 2008, when the first white paper came out. The first white paper came out about Bitcoin, came out essentially published through the cypherpunks mailing list. And this is done by the pseudonym Satoshi, and really described this this new technique for cash that solved the double standing problem, or addressed it, I guess. So that white paper was really the beginning of that history. It came in through this group that had an interest in it, and it came in at a time when there was a recession, significant recession, and people were quite concerned about the sense of money. Let's see. So part of who is Satoshi? Certainly that's not nobody still knows, no one is certain about Satoshi and who he is. Let's see. So how are we doing? We have plenty of time. Okay. So I guess let me talk about some of the things that make Bitcoin kind of hard to regulate. Because essentially what the cypherpunks were after, right, was a way to define money in a manner that that was harder for other entities, governments, to control. So I don't know, maybe again a little bit of history. Let me make an erasing hole here. So let's just talk a little bit about that, about kind of the core philosophies and to make governance of the whole thing hard, which was also, I think, a design goal. Okay, so consensus. So just sort of I guess I'll put it up as anti-governance. Bitcoin was designed to try to be hard to govern. So what were problems that the core, Satoshi wanted to address? I think the first part was this idea that you can make fiat money out of thin air, right? So you can't print money, right? In the fiat world, governments can just decide to make more money. We've gone through that during this recession again, and this is a point of view. I think you could strongly argue that the ability to print money is an important way to get out of like economic collapse. So I'll say I think that has happened twice now in our recent history, where basically the creation of money was used to sort of hold up the economy and send people paychecks and that sort of stuff when really the economy was not doing well. It's like, okay, fine, we'll just essentially borrow money or say by fiat that there is more money and use that to move forward. But Bitcoin core is that there should be a way that there's a value store where somebody can't just say there's more of this. And so I think that's one of those core things. So you can't print money, and you can move money. So I think in good ways, the printing of money has happened recently where I think a lot of economic harm would have otherwise happened without the creation of fiat money. There's been terrible consequences going the other way where governments have produced money, and that creates the idea of hyperinflation and can really, really destroy an economy. So again, it's a point of view, not a truth. So can move money, again, point of view, not a truth, is the idea that if you have something of value, you can decide where you want to send it. So kind of the good and the bad of it. So if you are in a first, second world country that's going through an economic collapse, you really don't want all what's called capital flight. You don't want all the wealthy people in your country to send their resources to some other country, because that's a spiraling down of the entire economy, because suddenly nobody is there is no capital resources within that country. So countries that are in economic trouble often restrict the transfer of money in and out of that country in order to prevent what's called capital flight. So let me put that word up there, capital flight. So that can be viewed as good. It can shore up a country and keep it from collapsing if there's a lot of capital flight going on. Of course, the downside is for the people inside of that country. What they get to witness is the value of their local fiat currency usually is plummeting at that point. Because if you put these rules up, it's usually because it's a really good idea as an individual to get money out of that country. And so preventing that is good. Well, it's a point of view thing. Hopefully, if you do it well, I'll say, hopefully, if you do it well, you never get to the point where you need to put up a rule like that your country is well enough run that you don't need to put restrictions down. But perhaps it will save an economy if you had to put that up. I think another place where you feel like that, well, it's a good thing is if moving money, say, to fund terrorism or some nefarious sort of behavior, most people would view as bad. And so the idea of moving money freely, right, allows for a bunch of functions to happen in an economy that perhaps you objectively would rather not have happen. And money drives a lot of abilities, right? So if a terrorist group has no money, it's a lot harder for them to get equipment to do those sorts of things. And so saying you can move money freely enables parts of the economy that perhaps you really not rather have. So just sort of a plus and minus. So capital flight, and then I don't know, I guess ethics of spending, something like that. Ethics of spending, like not having any control over that. Okay, and then I guess the last one, or maybe an important one to think about, is just taxation, right? So there's a lot of people that are not kind enough to just say how much they make. And if you could make money without paying taxes, a lot of people would choose to not report that. It's different from being legal, but if in a country you couldn't track money to know how to tax things, it could also end an economy, right? Because the governments would potentially collapse if there was no way for them to collect taxes in some sort of fair way where people could record things. So these are reasons to want to be choices about moving or not moving money. A libertarian point of view is it should be the right of the people who own the money to decide where it goes and decide their own ethics about what's correct or not correct about doing it. So Bitcoin is designed in a way that it's quite hard to control the movement of money, right? The money is everywhere already. It's an interesting point of view, right? Since it's a public record of the blockchain, and there's tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, I guess millions of copies of that around the world. it's already moved there. Like the money records are everywhere, and they're all just as meaningful as any other one. So it's already moved. It's just a matter of changing who owns it through recording new transactions that way. So it is quite hard to control. And the core prevents the idea of printing it, because the core software has a definition of what the total amount is. So I would say that these are two core principles in the design. I see that Dr. Reichenbach is here. I wonder what maybe he would like to add any bits before calling the lecture.
No, I don't want to add anything. But by the way, there is no reason to split the lecture in two. You can keep talking. Remember?
Well, I was afraid that people wouldn't come in time. So maybe if there's, I'd be totally happy to keep talking.
But they can watch the recording, you see. I mean, they can watch the recording anyway, even if they missed it, you're recording it. So it doesn't really make a difference.
So just play out for the second hour.
Yeah, second half, I guess, yeah.
Yeah, second half hour. Okay, when I put it out there, I just didn't want to surprise people today if they just only got their email about how the thing was going to work. And that's why I decided to just do it in two sections. Where else can we go? So consensus, capital flight, ethics of spending, and taxation. So I was going to try to show you the Bitcoin core and actually show you some of the software on that side. That seems like it might be interesting just to see. And I can stop and just ask for questions right now if anybody has them. Flight. All right. Kate, here, let me look quickly. So tell you what, I'm going to take, we're at 25. No, okay, we still have 5 minutes. So let me just continue. So capital controls and crime. You're sort of looking through the topics here about rules and governance. Okay, so we have talked I guess rules. I think this is the best way to put this. So how about just money rules? So there are rules about how money is supposed to be treated, and regulations by different countries have sort of evolved, and certainly have evolved as technology changes around it about what it means to have some sort of new kind of value. So so what are some rules that you're supposed to have when you're dealing with cryptocurrency? So how about, let's see, you can't print money. So this is maybe an interesting one to just talk about. So printing of money is actually something that is supposed to be illegal in the United States. There were cases in the early history where the value of money was challenged of the U.S. dollar, and there were local bankers or entrepreneurs essentially that printed their own money, and people trusted that more than they trusted the greenbacks. And so one of the rules that came out was only the federal government could create money in the United States. So it's an interesting step off of that already, is to say that Bitcoin as a thing is an attempt to create a sense of money, even though it sort of says that that's not supposed to be allowed. I think nowadays people don't take that very literally, because value is created a lot of ways by the economy. We've already mentioned that banks generally essentially create fiat money themselves by issuing loans that other people trust. So the piece of paper that says that you got a loan for so many, $10,000 to buy a car does not mean that the bank has $10,000. It just means that the person who gets that piece of paper trusts that the bank would eventually have $10,000 if they asked for it. And so there's many parts of the economy that can print money already. And so that's an interesting sort of law, but Bitcoin itself is trying to avoid that idea of just the expansion of the number of Bitcoin to prevent hyperinflation. I mean, the core thing that they didn't want is a hyperinflation choice. So as far as law is concerned, there is actually a law that you cannot actually print money, and yet it's done. Well, you cannot print money as a non-government entity in the United States. The United States does choose to create money when it feels appropriate. All right, so can you move money? So you are supposed to make records of the money that you spend, and certainly when you move money, say across international borders, that stuff is supposed to be recorded. But because of the design of Bitcoin, again, it's like hard to even say what does it mean for capital flight, right? So I guess again, from a regulation point of view, what can capital flight even mean if actually what? If the money's already flown, right? The Bitcoin represents value recorded in this blockchain, and the blockchain is everywhere already. So what does it mean to fly that sort of value into some different place? The rules are, well, in our country, we have pretty simple rules about capital flight because so far we haven't had to control it in a way. So we've had rules on capital flight of gold. So Dr. Reichenbach talked a little bit about that. That people were not allowed to own gold, and that's changed recently. Well, not recently. Was that? So do you remember that was about 1970? Is that right?
Well, the Nixon shock was 1974.
Yeah, and I believe that's when the gold. That was the end of.
That was the end of tying the U.S. dollar, pegging the U.S. dollar to gold, and soon afterwards, Americans were allowed to own gold again privately.
Right, that was the change. Okay, so the money rules. So what are rules or regulations on Bitcoin itself? So we did mention one thing, right? It's considered an investment, not money. As much as we've always talked about it essentially as a money, but as far as the taxation rules, it's considered an investment. But what if you wanted to create like an exchange? If you wanted to get in the business of building some exchange like Kraken or Coinbase or something like that. So those rules are not so clear. So the rules are less clear for Bitcoin. So just like, so for Colorado, right, the rules for marijuana have been in flux relatively recently because of just changes in policies that affected the state. So Bitcoin is a new entity. It's just not clear what are appropriate regulations. The book does mention New York State as having a pretty strict set of rules about creating an exchange and recording exchanges. I'll say even recently there have been some pretty notable crashes. I mentioned there was a Canadian exchange basically collapsed because the owner died unexpectedly, and they actually were the only keepers of the keys, and so nobody could recover the key store because of his death, and that was the end of that. So it was. I hope you think that if you chose to invest money for your retirement, that you wouldn't suddenly get a letter in the mail saying, well, we're sorry, but we lost all your money. So there's a certain amount of requirements of what are there, fiduciary responsibility that's required for someone who claims to be a fiduciary, someone who takes care of, put that word out there. So fiduciary is responsible for someone else's money. And if there's no regulation in a space, then it's harder to decide whether something is safe or not. And certainly people who use Bitcoin have been bitten in the past over thinking something was trustworthy and having it not actually be trustworthy because of a poor system sort of setup. Okay. All right. Are there any new people on the call that just showed up? Since I was trying to get past the gap and see how to proceed. Hard. Is anyone just showed up at 10:30? Yeah, I have no idea. Do I see? Oh, I see something in the chat. I'm going to check. All right. Okay, so I'll assume that everybody has been here since the beginning. And so let me just flip over to show you a little bit of the core software. So Bitcoin.org, and then Bitcoin Core, contribute, and then code. Turns out that, and this is an interesting bit of, it's relatively recent. So Microsoft actually owns GitHub. And so the repository is essentially managed by Microsoft now. But I'm sure there's many copies of the repository. So this is the Bitcoin Core. This is the software that defines how it all behaves. So, and I am not a core developer. It's pretty actively being developed. There's 26,000 a commit is a submission for a change into the software. But let's see here, code, clone. Let me make this a little bigger. So Git is a computer science tool for managing software. It's quite popular, and it's used for many hundreds of thousands of projects out there. And GitHub is a very popular place to store such repositories. So I'm cloning the Bitcoin software to this machine right now. So an interesting thing about the philosophy of Git, not Bitcoin, but Git. Git is distributed, I guess, in a way similar to Bitcoin. when I'm cloning this, I'm not getting just like the most recent version of it. This is why it's taking so long. I'm getting all the versions of Bitcoin, so that my clone of this repository has everything that this copy has that's on GitHub. So all the core developers, of course, have a copy of the core software, along with probably many thousands of people just like me who choose to clone the software because they're curious or are looking for some detail about how it works. So if I go in here, Bitcoin, here I have a local copy of all the tools, and let's see here. So let's just look in the source a little bit and see what we see. CD source. So the language that's used is something called C++. It's quite common language in the design of sort of system software. What's nice, one nice thing about it is it's cross-platform. It can be compiled in many places, and then just sort of grabbing a random spot. So SECP 256K1. That's this elliptic curve sec P. If I look in here, this is a little sub-project of the project, which happens to include the softwares that define, notice this libsecpk1. So this is the elliptic curve software, which is kind of the core of that public-private key system. So this is the components of the software that define how all that works. And then here's the details of how it's implemented, again, so everybody can look at it and agree that it's doing the right thing. So the core software is something that should, let's see here, back Bitcoin. I don't think I have the right tools on this system to build. I need an auto make in here, and I don't think I have that. So I don't think I want to try to shoot off a build of this thing, but it should not be too hard to build it on the right system. Have a minute. I have a minute. I think I'll try to spin it up one more time on a virtual machine where I have all the right build tools. And that way, it might be fun to see it like kick off. But it's the software. While everybody, like the entire world, has the right to read this, that's the nature of open source software typically. I do not have the rights to modify this and send it back. I certainly do have the rights. In fact, I can do it right here. This is a software idea of a fork that's different from what I put up on the board. But these branches, if I wanted to create my own version of Bitcoin and decided I wanted to do something like that, where is my fork? Oh, right there, fork. So I fork to my account, and so again, this is not what I was calling a hard or soft fork before. This is a fork of the software, so that now I have, this is my user account. So I am creating, or I now have a Bitcoin clone at the moment that has all the same software, but now it's mine, and I can sit there and modify things like the 10-minute rule in here and build a Bitcoin core that has a new set of core maybe principles, and maybe choose a different elliptic curve, that sort of stuff. So those things are all possible, and it's easy to do. Well, it's easy to do from a software point of view. What's really hard is to build up any amount of consensus, right? So yeah, I can create my own Bitcoin, but that doesn't mean anybody else cares. Nobody would choose to run my software without some sort of significant effort to somehow demonstrate why it's so much, like it's worth it. And maybe I'm not saying it's better than Bitcoin, but somehow good enough that that it's worth mining mine as opposed to somebody else. And this is actually the beginning of a lot of altcoins, right? Is to start from this core software, do some modifications, and then publish it as an altcoin. Let's see here. So that's a little bit of the Bitcoin stuff. There's also the Bitcoin improvement protocol. So Bitcoin, how about Bitcoin? Oh, sorry, proposal, not protocol. Huh. I wonder what was the first proposal. is not that helpful. Bit 001. Let's just find some Bitcoin. Sorry, I was involved in number 39. So BIP 39. So Bitcoin improvement proposal. So here's how to create them, but then here's a proposal for why. I'm gonna make it a little bigger. See. So mnemonic or sentence is superior for human interaction compared to the handling of raw binary hexadecimal representation of a wallet seed. So wallet seed at the core, Bitcoin's core software, the way it sees a seed is 256 random bits. Well, and they don't really have to be random. They should be essentially random. Otherwise, somebody will take your money, which is a bad idea. So the idea of the mnemonic is instead of representing the seeds as just bits, can you do something that's more human readable? And so here's the proposal. And there is code associated with this word list. Let's see here, test vectors, JSON. So GitHub, so there's bit 32, wait, oh, there we go. So reference implementation. So again, hosted on GitHub, it doesn't have to be, but here's the Bitcoin mnemonic proposal implemented as code. So you can look at it and again, use this as a reference point for any tools that you are about to build for yourself. So there's some of the proposals and how they kind of look, and you're allowed to make contributions to any of them. What it's called in software, it's called a pull request. That's this thing here. So even if I'm not, if I don't have rights to change this myself, I can still clone this repository, make some changes, and then propose the changes back to the core developers of, in this case, it's whoever's the author here. So here's sorry, not developers. I'm not going to get lost there. So here's some of the core developers that have modified the core code, and they're the ones that could essentially improve it. They could take a pull request, and so one is issues. So here's issues in the core, and pull requests are ways for just everybody, any member of the community can come back and say, okay, I think this change would be valuable. Here's why, and here's the code that would make that change appear. And there can be a conversation about what to change, and then roll it into either an improvement proposal or, in fact, the core. So I can obviously modify my own fork of this software, but I could also, this is actually quite common, make a fork, make an improvement, and then do a pull request back to the original saying, well, here's an improvement and here's why, and then ask the developers whether or not they're interested in that as an improvement, and then potentially merge that back into the core. So that's a bit of how that code consensus works. I think that's about it for me. You have anything else you'd like to add or questions anyone has?
Okay, let me chip in here. So I guess that's good timing. Thank you, Warren, for taking over today's class. Much appreciated.
You're welcome.
Yes, I should remind the students that we do have a quiz on Wednesday. It'll mostly be on the unbanked and Bitcoin in China, but maybe there will also be one or two questions about what Dr. McAvoy discussed today. And also till Wednesday, please read chapter 7 in the blue book. Yeah. So Dr. McAvoy kind of covered well, maybe the first few sections of that. So please read chapter 7 in the blue book till Wednesday also. Yeah. That's it from me.
All right, everybody, stay warm, and we'll see you on Wednesday.
Okay. Bye, everyone.